Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. Today, I'm so excited to have Bob Hamp here in the studio. We are going to go really deep in some areas of the brain and brain health that you may not have ever heard. And it's so important to understand because I really believe some of the things that we're going to talk about today are key conversations to have around getting to from where we are to where we want to be or where we are designed to be. It's a part of whole body wellness. I'm so passionate, as you know, about the physical body and being well in the physical body, but the mind is part of that and the spirit is part of that. Bob Hamp is a licensed marriage and family therapist, author, and spiritual leader renowned for his unique approach to teaching freedom through a spiritual lens. He's had 16 years in private practice and helped churches around the world really develop freedom ministries. Bob's work focuses on altering thought processes, think differently, to achieve spiritual healing and wholeness. He's a sought-after speaker, counselor, and helps individuals and communities and corporations and businesses find freedom and identity. And I hope you will join us in the conversation. It's going to be pretty great. Okay, well, welcome.
Well, thanks.
Bob Hamp, one of my favorite people in the world. And for a lot of reasons, obviously, you've been such a great help to me personally, being a marriage and family therapist, but been so exciting to have you in our corporate space and doing teachings for our staff.
And it's so unique that you guys have invited me into that.
Yeah.
Because what I do is not your standard corporate training.
Yeah, that's right. Communication, all the work on communication. We'll have to do some podcasts around communication and because those are really cool. But one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in and have conversation with you is, you know, you've heard me talk about whole body health and the, you know, mind, body, and spirit. Like we're made up of all of it. And so we talk a lot about physical health on this podcast. We have great experts in areas talking about disease and chronic disease and prevention and foods and diet and kids and just so many things. But something that's been missing that I think you're going to really fill the gap is talking, you know, tying that mental, spiritual piece in and how our brain works. I've been so fascinated by so many of your teachings on the brain, and we'll be sure and have in the link to your website so people can learn more. One of my favorite things to do is listen to your teachings online while I'm working out at the gym. It's really great.
Work out your brain while
work out my brain while I work out my body. That's so awesome. So I kind of really want to talk today about, you know, some of the basic foundational things that I think really were pivotal, not only to me, but staff. And now you've done this teaching several times and several hundred people have heard it. And even people that were resistant to even listening to a marriage and family therapist when we first started this are excited and anxious to hear what you have to say because it just makes so much sense. But one of the things that really has struck me is how much time we live in a survival mode.
Oh, so much of the time.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because in other shows, I've talked about, you know, how that affects our physical body with cortisol and high cortisol levels and inflammation and all of that. But so many people, you know, here we need to calm our brains down and we need to do this and we need to do that. But there's just not, I think we just don't understand the brain enough.
It's funny because everybody has one.
Yeah.
No,
we don't use it
instruction manual. Well, like we did get an instruction manual. Yeah. I was born with one. I didn't really understand it till the last 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd really love to just start with the basics because I really think that because we live so much in that part of our brain, it really is the root of a lot of disease.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've talked before about how stress is the cornerstone of pretty much every chronic disease.
Yeah.
And
I heard someone say the other day that 90 to 95% of the reason that people go to the doctor has to do with thought process, brain function, and emotional states.
So what are we to do? You know, and I'm a knower and a grower, so I'm really intrigued. So let's talk about the brain, and I want to hear everything you have to say about that and what keeps us stuck and how can we get unstuck?
Yeah, I've looked forward to these conversations since you first said, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, what you started out with is the idea that we're body, soul, and spirit. One of the things people don't often think is mental health is physical health.
Right.
And emotional health is physical health.
Okay.
If I have an emotion, it's because there's a chemical reaction taking place in my body.
Right.
If I have a chemical reaction taking place in my body, it's because I've had a thought.
Right.
And that thought, whether it's an accurate thought or not, produces physiological responses. And if those thoughts remain chronic over time, those physiological responses become not just a response, but a condition.
Yep.
And so if we don't really start to think that all of it is physical health, all of it is mental health, all of it is emotional health, we'll kind of slice and dice this into pieces as if we are somehow
to silos,
separate within our whole being.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons I think why we've clicked so much in all the conversation that we have. But let's take a look for a second. And this is really an understanding
I want to grab onto one thing you said, because I want to put it back here to address later, hopefully in this conversation, but if not, another one. But you said something, you worded it as a thought we've perceived that might not necessarily be true. You didn't say it like that, but that is such an important thing to come back to, because so much of the input that goes into our brain is, I think, a lens we're seeing something through that might not be accurate.
Right. Well, I heard somebody say the other day, I'm quoting all these, but I heard someone say the other day that there was a study done on people who were present at a particular traumatic event, and then people who had watched more than 2 hours of news coverage on that traumatic event, but weren't present. And that the people that watched more than 2 hours of news coverage on that event had more trauma and more long-term negative effects than those who were present at the event itself.
Wow, interesting. I can see how that would happen.
So they're doing a particular thing with their brain that's having a negative effect on them more so than those people who were present when the event happened. Even worse, the brain does the same thing when you experience something as when you imagine you experience something.
There you go.
The same chemical reaction, the same internal reaction within the various components of the brain, it does the exact same thing. For instance, it does the same thing if there's a physical threat as if there's an emotional threat, or here's the real key, if there's a perceived threat.
That's the perceived threat. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
It's like if you're having a bad day, right? Whatever it might be, and you come in and you go, yeah, have a seat. You're not thinking about me. But let's say that I'm insecure in some particular way, and I think, oh no, she doesn't really want me here.
Yep.
My brain does the exact same thing as if you didn't want me here, as it would if you're just having a bad day, and I perceive that as rejection. And so we've got to understand that our brain is managing perceptions just the same way it's managing reality. And if we can't get a hold of our brain, it will lead us around accidentally.
Yeah.
We'll let it become our master instead of really understanding. Understand how it works.
Yeah.
Understand that perception isn't always reality, and manage ourselves in a different way. So
I love it.
Yeah, so important, because so many people are walking around with the negative effect of things that never happened.
Yeah. Wow.
Or the negative effect of things that happened at a 2, but they're experiencing it as if it was an 8 or a 9.
Wow.
And that is, it all comes down to getting a user's manual to the brain.
Yeah.
So, let's take a look.
Give us a Cliff Notes user's manual to the brain.
By the way, thanks for
I know.
The marker board.
I know.
It's like you know me.
I do. And I'm excited because I'm a very visual learner as well. And I'm sure a lot of listeners and people watching on YouTube are visual. So
and particularly some things need to come in visually. Like we learn best when we learn whole to part, and yet we almost always, when we learn verbally only, we learn part to whole.
Yeah, that's right.
So the imagery gives us a chance to get the big picture and then put language to the smaller pieces of it.
It's good.
So if this is your brain, and of course you always want to say, and this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
These people from our generation want to say that, right? The brain could be divided really into 4 levels. And I extended the line right in the middle because the bottom part of the brain and the top part have 2 very different types of functions, but then we'll break it down by all 4 levels. But in particular, from the mid part down, the brain, and I like to say it this way, the brain's designed to keep us not dead.
Not dead.
Not dead. And people say, is there a difference between keeping us alive and keeping us not dead? And the answer is yes, because keeping us alive is the role of the top part of the brain. If we want to have a full, abundant, rich life that we dream about and create out of our own wishes, we've got to learn how to get up here. But you mentioned earlier how many people live in survival. Survival is not dead.
Yeah.
Full and abundant life is from here up.
And do you think we flip-flop between these a lot throughout the day, or we pretty much are down here?
I wish we flip-flop.
I know.
I wish we would flip-flop more. But honestly, and part of the problem is once we're down here, it's almost self-maintaining. Once we're in the basement part of the bottom half of the brain, there's so many things because, again, our brain responds to perceptions. And if the brain's perceived a threat, something that might make us dead, this part of the brain kicks in and says, okay, my job is to keep you not dead. I'm going to do my job. So I'm going to hold you down here. In fact, I've referred to, if this is the brainstem down here, right here's the brainstem. I put the initials, but I don't want to put BS. Even though it sometimes feels like BS.
Yeah.
The brainstem, that's kind of the gatekeeper between the rest of the brain and the central nervous system. That brainstem, when it's really fully triggered, it's almost as if a gate slams in between the bright, intelligent, creative person that you are and the panicked body that you're living in.
I've experienced this.
We all have. And if it's not full on panic, at least there's a sense of, I've just got to get through this day. And if the brainstem shuts off the between the two kind of high thinking and just sensationally experiencing parts of us, then it's almost like a gate has slammed and we live separated, even though we live in one body.
Okay.
You talk about, healing body, soul, and spirit. If physiologically the top part of our brain is shut off from the bottom part, it's hard to experience wholeness in any dimension, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
That's great.
So the brainstem in particular, its version of not dead says, if there's a threat, think primitive man, saber-toothed tiger stalking us through the grass.
Right.
We perceive the grass moving, tiger or not. The brainstem starts to go, oh, is there something to worry about? Then we see the yellow stripes or black stripes on the yellow cat. And now the brainstem says, yes, it's a threat. And it starts to do exactly what it's designed to do. It puts us in a state that I call all effed up.
Yeah.
Right. All effed up is
fight,
flight, freeze, faint, fawn. And I actually discovered a sixth one because it's mine, and that's fix.
Yes.
Right. Those people who are, I thought you might be familiar with that.
Yep.
But this releases, as you've probably talked about before, it releases two very specific chemicals to prepare the body for immediate response to a threat. You're either going to get ready to fight. So there's the first one is fight, flight, freeze. This is why we call it all effed up. They're all F words, but it releases cortisol.
Yep.
Which I'm going to ask you to talk about that in a minute. I'm having to write neatly because of the recording.
Maybe bigger too.
And it releases adrenaline. I'm just going to say
adrenaline. Yes.
And the idea is that these two chemicals would last about 20 to 30 minutes to get you from danger to safety.
Okay. Yep. That's about right.
But if we live here all day long and the brainstem shuts off the top half of our brain from the bottom half of our being, and those two chemicals become a constant state, what might we expect to experience?
Well, everything. Not sleeping, not being able to shut our brains off. I hear this all the time. I can fall asleep, but I can't stay asleep at night because my brain is going, high heart rate, high blood pressure.
And isn't it interesting? Our brain can be going while we're sleeping.
Yeah.
Because these two chemicals, they don't need language.
Yeah.
They can just, it's like electricity.
Yeah.
It's just running through the brain. That's what we mean by the brain stem shuts off the thinking part of the brain.
Right. And this is, to me, where worry lives and stays, it seems like.
Yeah. And I would almost push it a little deeper and call it anxiety.
Anxiety. Yeah.
Because worry is like, I can't pay my bills.
Right.
How do I get my car fixed? Is my partner safe to be with? All those kind of things. But anxiety it's kind of this free floating state that may not have any particular source.
Right.
I feel an electrical charge and I don't even have a thought to go with it.
Got it.
And it's why we can be asleep at night and our body's just like
anxious,
this.
Yeah.
Waiting for a moment to go, oh, why am I awake now?
And anything can cause that, so many different things that we may not even realize are causing it, different disease processes, different fears, fear of food, fear of
and the thing is,
dying, whatever.
Experientially, we may not know the difference.
Right.
It could be a disease condition of some sort, physiological genesis, but it could also be a perception genesis.
Right.
I perceive that my partner's not safe. I perceive that my boss might fire me.
More of the time than not, I would imagine it's a perception issue. Yeah.
And as we go up to the second part of the bottom half and talk about its method of keeping us not dead, you'll see that sometimes when I said this is self-maintaining, I'll show you in a second how this becomes the way that we live, not only all night while we're trying to sleep, but all day while we're trying to just fulfill the various obligations and expectations and requirements of being human in modern culture.
Okay.
So you see down here, you've got kind of this electrical charge going through the body. The thinking part of the brain has been shut off, but the body's being fed kind of this whole cortisol, adrenaline, electrical charge. And that's just because of either a real threat, perceived threat, or as I said, emotional threat.
Right.
The body does the exact same thing in all three of those cases.
Okay.
Well, this is to respond to a threat. The way this part of the brain keeps us not dead is by making sure that we satisfy our appetites.
Oh, this is the big one.
This is
probably where we live mostly.
This is really where most of us live and what keeps us down here. This may, like you're having a bad day at work or you're perceiving some issue with your boss or a coworker.
Right. Or you're in some litigation or there's some stressful thing happening in your life that's kind of keeping you there.
Yeah. This one, we'll just call it the midbrain because the real word is too long and I don't want to try to pronounce it. But the midbrain functions really, again, to keep you not dead by saying you need to eat, you need to drink, you need to sleep. As my wife says, you need to go to the bathroom, and as long as you do what the midbrain tells you to do, it'll give you a little reward. These days there's a whole thing called gamification where if you do X, Y, or Z, you get a token or you get some kind of, certificate that says, and there's always a reward. The brain has one of those, and it has this, if you do what I tell you to, I'm going to give you something called
dopamine.
I was going to say.
And those video games give dopamine too, by the way.
That's exactly
why. And social media
that.
Likes and all that.
It's exactly why they do that, because they know it keeps people doing something even when the thing they're doing no longer makes sense to do.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part about this part of the brain is it's designed to make sure you eat healthy foods, drink, liquids that will keep you hydrated, sleep when you're tired and wake up when you're rested. It's designed to do that, but it's also very programmable.
Yes.
It's one thing when I'm an infant and I'm sleeping and eating and doing the things I need to, but by the time I'm a little bit older than infancy, I'm past my teenage years. But every decade that we live, the midbrain starts to get programmed to where now the appetites are whatever we have fed it, it starts to crave. And so here's how the midbrain works. It does it's almost two sides of a coin. It's two functions. One of them is a drive. Mm-hmm. You want this.
Yeah.
And then it fills in the blank and says, this is the thing that you want. So we experience both of those things. We experience a craving and we experience a target for that craving.
And this is the reward.
Dopamine
is the reward.
Yeah, we think the reward is the cup of coffee.
Right.
Or the Oreo.
Right.
But really, when we first start to pour that coffee,
when I push the button to turn the coffee machine on.
Yes. So there's
dopamine hit number one.
In the addiction world, they talk about that the rituals of addiction are just as powerful as the actual substances of addiction.
Interesting.
So as soon as you start, if you're, I don't know enough about certain drugs, but you start to mix up what you're going to do. You start to use the hypodermic. You start to push the button on the coffee machine. Mm-hmm. You're already doing.
You open your phone. You open your computer. You turn on your TV. Whatever it is.
The push, and it tells you. And what it fills in that blank with is two things: family of origin experiences. What did we learn growing up?
That's a whole show.
Oh my gosh, that's 2 or 3 shows.
Yeah,
it's my degree. So So family of origin starts to tell us what is the thing that will give you relief. For instance, if you're born and raised in an alcoholic family, about half of them will learn that alcohol is the thing that will give them relief, and half of them will learn that stopping somebody from drinking will give them relief.
Yeah.
And so we learn those things. The drive is real because when the dopamine starts to get low, we start to crave, and there's the drive. And the midbrain also tells us what to crave. Here's the really difficult part of this. We've talked about physical appetite so far, but as I mentioned, it's also dealing with our emotional appetites.
Yeah.
And an appetite is when you don't have something that you want. So imagine if we really want acceptance, then rejection triggers this part of the brain.
I see. Yes.
If we really want value, then feeling devalued by somebody triggers this part of the brain.
Got it.
If we want to feel like we're, making a difference in the world, when people treat us like we're nobody, it triggers this part of the brain, and it says, what you need is to work harder. What you need is to be prettier, to be thinner. What you need is to accomplish something. There's the drive. And then it tells you, based on all of your life patterns, what is it driving you towards?
Great.
We think it's a substance, a behavior, relational pattern, but really what we're after is dopamine.
Right.
Dopamine, how would you describe its function?
It's the pleasure hormone. That is really it in a nutshell. Or we think it is.
Yes.
It tricks us. There's a better hormone that you're going to talk about in a minute that really is the pleasure hormone. But the interesting thing about dopamine, and I learned this from you, is that it doesn't last very long. Right. And then it takes more to get the same hit the next time.
Yeah,
so talk a little bit. Okay, sugar's a good one.
Think sugar, because when you eat sugar is my drug of choice when I'm still in my, my favorite addiction.
Yeah.
And you get a quick sugar high and then a crash.
Right.
Sugar functions the same way in that, if you've had one Hershey's Kiss or Oreo, whatever it might be, and you have the high and the crash, you might need 1.5 to get the same high that you had before. Now the crash goes even lower, and now you need 2 Oreos, and then the crash goes even lower. Now you need a whole box.
Right.
And so dopamine works that way. Whatever the push is towards, it's really, and here's what a lot of people don't understand about addiction. And not that all of this is about addiction, but it's really the same concept. Addicts don't necessarily go after the high. They are simply trying to feel normal.
Right.
But normal becomes further and further away with every dip, with every crash. Well, dopamine is the same way. We're not trying to feel the rush of dopamine.
Right.
We just feel what it feels like to not have it.
Right.
We start to jitter. We start to feel, anxious. We start to crave. We have all these negative experiences, appetites, something's missing.
Right.
And our brain, this part of our brain is saying, if you just get this, do this, taste this, drink this.
Look this way.
Yeah.
Talk this way, act this way.
It's a huge one with eating disorders.
Yes.
Right? People who struggle with food, whether struggle just trying to lose weight or full-blown eating disorder type things, somewhere the midbrain is saying you weigh too much. You ate too much, you need to purge.
Yep.
And it's saying, if you'll do the thing.
Or stay away from that thing because that thing's going to make you X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. This part of the brain is the one that keeps us here, because all day long, think of appetites and now use the word obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make the boss happy. Got to make the wife happy.
Yeah.
Got to make the world happy. And as the world demands things of us, and we start to function more and more out of obligation and requirement, and this kind of living drives us into this dopamine cycle of, when I make the boss happy, I get a hit. Mm-hmm. If I disappoint him, and here's the really tricky part, I might actually get a hit for that too.
Yeah.
And we can get addicted to both the positive and the negative, and it just keeps us on the cycle.
Okay.
Now watch this. This is what I taught your people last time, and it's new for me. At some point, this part of the brain talks to the nervous system, and the nervous system says, okay, it sends a signal down here, sends the dopamine coming down here. And if what it says is, hey, this is how I want you to live your life, and this will make you feel better, the nervous system says, I feel better. When you've got agreement between the brain and the nervous system, we call that real, whether it is or not.
Yeah.
We call that truth. The agreement between our brain and our body becomes our standard for what's real. And imagine if the survival part of your brain and the raw animal of your nervous system is telling you what's true.
You get stuck there.
You get stuck.
Yeah. And
this is how people by their late 20s, early 30s are just living in this bottom part of their brain, because their nervous system is saying, yeah, the world's a dangerous place. And it says, but here's how you stay safe, or at least here's how you feel better when you feel like you're in danger. And you do that, and the body says, yeah, that is a relief. And the relief is sent back up here, and it says, okay, so the danger must be real.
Yeah.
Whether it is or not.
And this is, I think of so many different, things that people get stuck in, even with its, it's not just addiction. I love the word appetite, because that makes it anything that is perceivedly serving a purpose, and then because it makes our nervous system feel better, I think that we justify it and we keep justifying the behavior, right?
Yeah.
Are you looking for a healthcare provider who understands the importance of integrative medicine? Evexias Health Solutions is changing the way we approach wellness. We train practitioners on cutting-edge therapies focusing on a preventative care model. If you're ready to take a proactive approach to your health, Evexias can help you find a provider who's right for you. Just head to Evexias.com, that's EVEXIAS.com, and click on the button, Find a Provider, to find a provider near you.
Here's the interesting thing. This loop can actually work for positive things. And that's the really tricky part about managing our brains is we can be compulsive about exercise. Or we can be healthy about exercise. Exercise is healthy, but where it's coming from in our brain may not be.
Right. And even healthy food choices are healthy until it becomes so restrictive it's not healthy. Yeah,
because then it's coming from here.
Right.
If we'll talk about, let me jump up here for just a moment.
Because there's good news for everyone listening.
There has to be. Otherwise, let's just kind of all go into our dopamine.
And be depressed.
But there is good news because knowing this helps us get out of it and get where we can create the life that we dream of every day while we're in this loop.
And that we're designed, we're going to talk about that in another show, but what we're designed to do and be, I think people miss that. We're all born with a special thing that no one else can do.
Yeah. In fact, I just said that to someone at your offices this morning, that when we really find our created design, you'll know because you're created to stand out at something that only you're created to stand out at.
Yeah.
And so when we start to move up here, that's where we can discover that, find that, cultivate that. From down here, it's just survival, and our body and our brain are keeping us locked into the past.
Yeah.
We'll talk about how to get up here in a second, but first of all, let's talk about what's up here. What's up here is the system of what nobes in the brain called, what's a nobe? I made up a word.
You did.
Parts of the brain called the limbic system.
The limbic system, if no one can read your little bitty writing.
I'll do better next time. So if you think about the brain, typically when you see the brain, you kind of picture it like this. You've got the brain stem down here. You've got that kind of helmet-shaped space on top, which is this up here. Then you've got the midbrain here, and underneath that helmet is this system called the limbic system. Simply put, the way I would describe the overall function of the limbic system is, here I go writing, and I'll do near this side, is that the limbic system exists to produce and maintain connection.
Yeah.
Connection is one of those things I've tried to explain it, and I think sometimes it's easier to experience than to explain. It is the natural response when two people make eye contact and drop their guard.
Which people don't do a lot of.
And so that's why it's hard to explain. If you're living down here, you can make eye contact but keep your guard up because we're both trying to survive. But connection is a natural human state. And in fact, connection, much like this, connection is also self-maintaining because it produces, the limbic system produces, and then it produces this thing called connection based on that other hormone you mentioned a few minutes ago.
My favorite one.
Well, everybody who gets a sample is their favorite because it's the best. Oxytocin.
I've trained my husband to give me an oxytocin hit every morning.
Now, how have you trained him to do that?
Because there's actually studies that show a 10 to 20 second hug produces the same amount of oxytocin as sexual pleasure.
Really?
Yep.
Well, and
it's very long, though. When you're standing there and you're counting your 10, it's like, are we done yet? But if you can, this is what's interesting. If people will do this with anybody, it doesn't have to be a spouse or a partner, but there comes a point at right about 10 seconds, if you can hang in there, that all of a sudden you go,
yes, that's this.
Yeah.
That's the sensation of oxytocin.
Yeah.
And it's literally, there is the automatic defensive-ness of living in survival. And that's why you said 10 seconds. We did an exercise one time with a group of people in Asia. And we pair people off. We're training counseling skills. We pair people off and make them make uninterrupted eye contact for 2 minutes. You think 20 seconds is...
It's hard.
Yeah. It's incredibly hard to make uninterrupted eye contact, especially in a culture where eye contact is avoided. So
because it's disrespectful to look somebody right in the eyes in some cultures.
So we put these people face to face, told them to make uninterrupted
eye. So uncomfortable.
And it is. The first 30 seconds feels like an hour.
Yeah.
But here's what happened. A minute in, we started hearing sniffles. A minute and a half, we start hearing...
Aww.
And these men and women all around the room
emotional.
Are starting to connect to the person in front of them.
Yeah.
And here's the real thing, Terri, to their own heart.
Yeah. Amazing.
When you live so in the bottom half of your brain all the time, we lose track of what is the most important part of our makeup, and that is our heart. Because from it come all the issues of our life.
Right.
But if we're living in survival, we're cut off from those most important parts of our being. So oxytocin, unlike that kind of roller coaster of dopamine, produces the same effect, but it does more of a slow rise. Mm-hmm. And because it produces connection, you get more oxytocin. The more oxytocin, it fosters more connection.
Yeah.
And it becomes self-maintaining. And it's like it plateaus out. And it's like having energy all day long. Mm-hmm. Instead of sugar, which is...
Yeah. So what's so important about this, and this is why I love that you teach this to our teams and in our businesses, but is because, and I've heard you say this, so I'm asking the question, but I know the answer. I would imagine being up here would make you a much more productive human.
Oh. More productive, more able to work in teams, more creative, more innovative, more able to see kind of the big picture.
Yeah.
Down here, you're hyper-focused.
So, you're spend a little time on the next one, and then I want to talk about, and we're going to keep talking about this concept because this will be the first one, and everything kind of stems from this, I think.
Yeah.
But I think there's tangible ways that we could teach people how to recognize when you're here and how to get out of there.
Yeah.
But what's the cherry on the top?
Yeah. And it's cherry on top is a great way to describe it. Here, you're kind of really, you're alive.
In the pits.
Not alive. You're surviving, but barely. You're hanging on by your knuckles. Here, you may start to experience some pleasure. At least you're not like on the edge of death. But you're still kind of in that place of anxiety because you're riding that roller coaster of dopamine. And on the dip, you're always feeling kind of the, I'm not okay.
Yeah. Give me more.
Crossing from here to here, which we need to talk about how to get from here to here and from here to here.
Yep.
Crossing from here to here, it's like you've been indoors for 5 years and you step out into a perfect sunshiny spring day.
Wow. Great analogy.
Because here, you start to live more of what we're all made for.
Yeah.
A significant piece of that is connection. Mm-hmm. None of us are made to live alone in the world we live in. But also within connection, you discover things about you, which leads you to have the experience of being in the neocortex. The whole kind of helmet-shaped part of the top of your head is called the cerebral cortex. The most sophisticated part right here in the front, the forehead, is where we experience recognition and awareness and the ability to analyze and recognize patterns and solve problems and be, kind of the epitome of experiencing you in all that you're made for in the world that you're in takes place in this amazingly complex part of the brain. So I like to say that up here is the place you experience identity. We can talk about it, but if you want to have an experience of it, you've got to get out of here, pass through here to this place of, oh, this is who I am.
This is what I'm here for. Okay. Yeah. That, and I want to have a whole conversation about identity because I think that's a good next conversation.
Yeah.
Because it ties in, right? People may think, well, why are you talking about all this? Because it all ties together because I believe, and I've seen it, when we're able to move from here to here to here, and we're living most of our life up here, between the limbic system and the neocortex, that is when we're the healthiest physically.
Yes.
Right?
Right. So think about this. This one down here, you talked about the wear and tear on the organs.
Right.
And the constant, it's like having your car, accelerator on the floor, but the car's in neutral. And nothing good for your car about that.
Right.
Get up here, you're kind of riding this wave of crash and burn and crash and burn. And so all this stuff has just wear and tear on the mind and the organs of the body. We talk about mental health being physical health. These are real chemicals that flow through the real elements of your body.
Yep.
And what you think can start to wear down every organ in your body, especially if you're staying down here.
Right.
Come up here for a second. I talked about stepping outside on a spring day, and you know how the air feels fresher and everything just feels more alive. The moment you step into real connection, and one of the things we teach is that connection starts with yourself. If I'm disconnected from me, I can't connect to anyone or anything, whether I have a spiritual belief in connecting to my creator or a desire to connect to the other people in my life. If I'm disconnected from me, cut off from myself, no connection is possible.
Yeah.
And remember, we said, you can do good things out of the bottom half of your brain. You can run a company from here.
Yeah.
You can build a building that no one's ever built before. You can do a lot of things out of drivenness and compulsivity. But you want to discover what's in you to give to the world?
Yeah.
Start by connecting to yourself and discover instead of drive. Explore instead of force. And when you start to connect to yourself and discover who you really are, the experience of just take the organs. You take all the pressure off of your organs and you start to experience the ongoing kind of heightened pleasure and all the other chemical benefits of connection where you can start to figure out who you are and function as that. Everything in your body kind of lets down.
Yeah.
And you can start to give health to your body instead of taking it.
Well, and you're not so much craving things that are bad for your body. And, it's interesting because oxytocin is also the hormone that's secreted when you're nursing your baby, right? That's a big one that's created. It's also released when it's time to go into labor. I mean, it has all of these things that have to do with human life and connection. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing. How is there something simple that, one, we can recognize when we're in this slower part of our brain, and two, how to get up out of it just as an exercise in awareness?
Yeah, I think this one is easy. That's a great question, important question, because this is a great map, but no tools.
Right, yeah.
Right? When we're in this part, we're going to feel kind of the electricity in our system. We may be doing a task. We might be getting some things accomplished, but at the end of the day, we're like, why can't I rest? Why do I feel
I need that bottle of wine.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And what the brain is saying is you need some dopamine.
Yeah.
Go get the wine.
Yeah.
Go get the whatever, good steak, whatever it might be. To get from here to here, the simplest and most effective way to move from here to here is oxygen.
Yeah. Taking a deep breath.
The brainstem's afraid of dying. Oxygen tells it that it's not. Right? It's not just the relaxing effect of oxygen. It's a message to the body sends the message up and says, look, we got oxygen. You're okay. And so when you can get oxygen and the top part of the brain says, hey, you're not dying, you can at least move up here. This is the tricky one to navigate because, like I said, you can do some good things out of compulsivity and drivenness. So when you're here, you're going to feel things like, for instance, if somebody is addicted to running or exercise, what they're going to feel is, I feel great when I exercise, but if I don't feel okay about myself. If I miss a day or two of exercise, I feel like something's wrong with me. It's one thing to say, I need to be consistent. It's another thing to feel the lack as if something's wrong with me. So when we're doing a good thing, but we stop doing it and we feel like something's wrong with us because we're not doing it, people that work hard.
Right.
You and I both work hard at our professions. If we take a week off or 10 days off.
You start to feel guilty and
I
need to be doing something.
2 years ago, I said, why is it that holidays I allow myself to rest? But a day off that's not a holiday, I feel like I should be doing
It's the American way. I was just talking about this with someone else.
That's the difference between this and this.
Okay.
So this is, I do it and I do it well, or I do it and I'm tearing myself apart, but I do it and I do it well. But if I stop doing it, I feel guilt, shame, fear. Something's not okay if I don't go back to it.
Got it.
That's the mark of the dopamine that's starting to ebb, and we're starting to crave dopamine.
I see.
That's why changing our lives is so difficult, because we have to at some point starve the dopamine beast to get up here.
Yeah.
And that's the next step. And that is, how do we get from here to here? It's of all these levels, the trickiest one is to get here, you have to get here.
Yeah.
Yes, starve the dopamine beast. If you can recognize it and know what feeds the dopamine beast. But really, connection because it breeds connection. I do this with married couples in my practice all the time. Turn and face each other, like I did with the people in Asia. Turn and face each other, make eye contact. And at first they're, either they're angry at each other or they're afraid of each other or all those things. And there's laughter, there's nervous laughter. It's like, it's so awkward. And then there's a moment, like you said, where they go, and they settle in. Yeah. And it's like, literally they say hi to each other more often than not, because it's like, oh, suddenly I'm here.
Yeah. And I see you.
And I see you, and I see that you see me.
Yeah.
And there's like a moment of, okay, you feel the cross there when it's like, okay, guards down.
Yeah.
I feel the connection start to grow, and I feel more like myself. And if I don't do whatever we're doing, I'm not going to feel like I've lost myself, but I definitely feel like I find myself here, and I find trust grows.
Yeah.
Collaborative ability grows. Connection, like I said, it's harder to describe than to experience.
Right.
But when you experience it, you know it.
It's awesome.
Get here, it will propel you up.
Yeah. Great conversation. I think it's so important to understand how all this works, because I think so many of us, and I see it, are just getting from day to day, moment to moment, and just kind of existing through life to get, you wake up, you do it, you go to sleep. You wake up, you do it, you go to sleep, It's kind of like you use the Matrix as an example a lot. How can I get up there in that neocortex? But just the first thing is understanding it and being aware of it. And I think since I've learned this, really paying attention to that and connecting. And one easy way that I started doing myself to climb up here when I notice it a lot is when I'm in a grocery store, or when I'm in any kind of a restaurant or anything. And usually the people that are helping you in those places, they're invisible.
Yeah.
Right. And so making effort, even when I'm checking out at the grocery store, to really just look at the person and get their, have a conversation and just say, how are you doing? How is your day? Like, if you really are asking from the space of, I'm really trying to connect with you, it's amazing how it responds. So not only are you going up here and grabbing some oxytocin, but you're giving oxytocin back.
Giving it. And it's such a beautiful example, because one of the things about this that's so crucial, whatever part of my brain I'm in, I put a very powerful draw on the person across from me to go there with me.
Yep.
So if I'm down here and I come in and I'm fuming and I'm just trying to survive and keep you from making me matter, it's easy for you to go to that place. But like you said, at the grocery store, you get here, grocery store, cart place, even your spouse, sometimes you can take a moment to go, hey, I know we've been going and blowing all day long. Can we just take a minute to sit?
Yeah.
And in that moment, you're both giving each other this.
Yeah, it's so
and imagine the power of beginning to live that way. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to end with this, because I'm using myself as so many examples, because I'm trying to give people ways to think about this that may be applicable in their own lives. But I remember years ago, I have clinics and I've had employees, now for 15 years. And one of my daughters used to work in the clinic all the time, and she would laugh and she goes, Mom, so many people come and go, your mom doesn't like me. Your mom doesn't like me. And I'm like, what am I doing for people to think I don't like them? And then one day I asked this question, and I guess one of the girls had what felt safe enough to go, well, it's just because when you come through the office, it's like you're just walking through and you're going to your office and you don't really say hi to anybody and you don't really, engage. And I think you're just focused on what you're trying to accomplish. And then we're thinking, is she mad? What's wrong? It's like, oh, and it was such a great eye opener for me. And I'm so present to that now, and I'm not great at it. But when I go through the office, if I see, make eye contact, how are you doing? It's so important. And what I've realized for me that it does is I get so much more done at work that feels like at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, that was a really productive day.
Yeah.
And it's just those little times of connection. It's so, so important.
This part of the brain will tell you you'll get more done if you just put your head down and churn away.
That's right.
But there's so much more capacity to get things done up here. There's so much more creativity, as you mentioned. Yeah. And so from here, a minute's worth of work is, you can get more done in a minute here.
Right.
Than
a
you
minute
can.
done. Yeah. So good. Well, we're going to come back and talk about all of these things at a little deeper level, because I really want people to start grabbing onto this part of whole body health as just as important as eating the right things, eating the right foods, exercising, all the things we're talking about. So thanks for being here.
Love it. Thanks.